think you can say anything you want, wrong. Free speech is the cornerstone of democracy, allowing people to express fury without ending up in jail, at least in theory. It's not a golden ticket, and many have learned that the hard way, with consequences ranging from firings to criminal prosecution. Free speech is protected, but never absolute. On today's episode of the Infographic Show, we're explaining why free speech isn't as free as you think, the foundation and first challenges. When the U.S. Founding Fathers drafted the Constitution, they added the Bill of Rights to ensure basic rights. The First Amendment covers 5 main freedoms: religion, press, assembly, petition, and, of course, speech. For much of human history, free speech was a fantasy. Absolute monarchs punished critics harshly. The U.S. Constitution was designed to end that, but the protection lasted just over 12 years. President John Adams, bitter over press attacks, passed the Alien and Sedition Acts in 1798. The Sedition Act prohibited false, scandalous, or malicious writings against the government. Many journalists were arrested. The act expired in 1800 after Adams lost re-election and was likely unconstitutional. It was the first real test of the First Amendment. The Supreme Court later clarified that the government couldn't prosecute people merely for political criticism or unpopular beliefs, wartime threats to free speech. Crises often challenge free speech rights. During the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and imprisoned Northern politicians sympathetic to the Confederacy. Decades later, during World War I, President Woodrow Wilson invoked war powers, leading to the Sedition Act of 1918. This was a broad assault on free speech, targeting German sympathizers, communists, and anti-war activists. Though upheld during wartime, it was repealed in 1920. World War II saw fewer conflicts, but the Vietnam War brought a pivotal case. Do students have the same free speech rights as adults? The Tinker Kids, ages 8 to 15, were suspended from school for wearing black armbands to protest the Vietnam War. The school argued it was disruptive speech. The Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in Tinker v. Des Moines that the First Amendment does apply in public schools and that the armbands had not caused a real disruption to learning, defining the limits, legal exceptions. The First Amendment protects a wide range of speech, even hateful ones. In 1969, KKK leader Clarence Brandenburg was prosecuted for advocating violence. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously in Brandenburg v. Ohio that speech can only be punished if it's likely to incite imminent lawless action. In 1977, the ACLU defended a Nazi group's right to rally in Skokie, Illinois, arguing free speech has to be for everybody. The Supreme Court ultimately ruled in favor of the group. Despite these rulings, the right to free speech is not absolute. The Supreme Court has refined a few key exceptions: incitement and threats. Speech must be either directly inciting or threatening violence, per the Brandenburg Standard. For example, saying "I hope a piano falls on the mayor's head" is safe. Saying someone should push that root piano onto the mayor when he leaves the office might get police attention. This includes urging people to harm themselves. In 2017, a woman was convicted of manslaughter for her twisted text messages urging her now-deceased boyfriend to take his own life. Lies and fraud. Restrictions are allowed on speech based on spreading false information. While defamation is often a civil prosecution, lies that rise to the level of fraud can lead to jail time. A famous example is Elizabeth Holmes of Torontos, who was sentenced to 11 years for raising money based on falsified technology and results. Lying under oath, known as perjury, is also a serious crime. Special contexts: the military and courts. The military prioritizes discipline over a recruit's free speech. Courts have special standing. Perjury leads to criminal penalties. Classified information. Divulging classified information by those sworn to secrecy is espionage, not free speech, and leads to heavy criminal penalties. Commercial speech. False advertising and other commercial speech are far more open to government regulation and fines. Core analogies and obscenity. The Supreme Court has used analogies to clarify the boundaries, Shouting fire in a crowded theater from a 1919 draft opponent case established that restrictions are allowed if the speech is designed to cause panic. Fighting words refined in 1942 refers to speech that incites an immediate breach of the peace. This is why dozens of people are arrested every year for shouting or posting threats against the president, regardless of whether they could carry them out. Another contentious topic is obscenity. The Miller test requires content to appeal to prurient interest, depict sex or bodily functions in a patently offensive way, lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Private consequences versus government censorship. One of the biggest misunderstandings is the difference between a government action and a private one. The First Amendment only covers government intervention. It does not protect people from the consequences of their speech from a private employer or the general public. No one has a right to be employed or served by a private institution. When people lose gigs or jobs for running afoul of public ire, it's often called cancel culture. This is legal because most of the U.S. operates on at-will employment, meaning a person can be fired for any reason, including offensive speech, as long as it doesn't relate to their status as a protected group. A public relations executive, Justine Sacco, was fired for an offensive tweet before her flight landed. Director James Gunn was fired and later rehired for old offensive tweets. Comedian Roseanne Barr saw her top-rated sitcom revival canceled after a racist tweet. When the government gets involved, the lines blur. Government employees don't have absolute job protection for offensive speech. New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani fired a cop and firefighters who appeared on a parade float with racist images, and an appeals court ultimately upheld his decision, making clear that public employees have limits. In a recent case, following a political assassination, late-night host Jimmy Kimmel was suspended indefinitely by Disney-owned ABC after making controversial comments. It was rumored that FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr directly contacted ABC and its syndication partners, warning them of broadcast license reviews. Though the suspension was short, the implied threat of government coercion in pressuring a private entity to act triggered a widespread debate about the blurring of public and private pressure. International context. The United States has remarkably broad free speech protections, coupled with labor laws that offer less protection than many other countries. In other democracies, like Canada, France, and the United Kingdom, the focus is more on the public good. It is easier to be prosecuted for hate speech if it is found to pose a danger to a vulnerable population. In nations without strong constitutional guides, restrictions are much broader. South Korea criminalizes the promotion of communism as a national security threat. The Middle East, like the UAE and Qatar, has strict laws on promoting an Islamic activity. China strictly cracks down on anti-government agitation. Russia has notoriously severe crackdowns, especially since the start of the war in Ukraine. Most countries use the rationale of greater good and national security to limit speech. Without the constitutional guidepost of the First Amendment, those limits are often broader. In the age of technology, as people become comfortable saying whatever's on their mind to a global audience, the limits of free speech are tested daily. The principle is designed to protect ideas and expression, but when those ideas cause direct harm, the principle tends to go out the window. So, free speech doesn't mean you can say whatever you want, and some laws, both civil and criminal, make that very clear.